called phantom Earth, where that is not a positive reality field. That is literally where certain things happen that disconnect us from the rest of the time matrix, where you can't get back out and you get stuck. Your consciousness gets stuck and it can't reincarnate out. There's something called the bridge zone, which has to do with inner Earth. And then there's something called the ascension path, which has to do with a planet called Tara, the counterpart of this planet in density 2. These are the 3 tracks of time we're moving into. What we do between now and the time when particle conversion happens will determine where our angular rotation of particle spin is in our body and in the units of consciousness that we hold. That will determine what future we see. So it's very personal and it's very cosmic all at the same time. So I'm going to let us do our break now. Not too bad, like 10 minutes later than usual. Just do a 15-minute break. 15, that wasn't 50. Yeah. And these papers are up here for anybody that wants them. Told me that they were there the whole time. And it has a little card on it that says, Ashana from all, we love you. And I'd just like to thank you very much for the beautiful flowers, whoever, organized that. And I apologize for having them in my negative space where I couldn't see them, Now I'm seeing them in the positive, so they're very beautiful. Thank you. Alrighty. Now, we'll probably, I should know better than to do this, but we'll probably wrap up around 10:15. I say that because probably that means we'll be out of here by 10:30. I tend to go over time. Now, there's so much information that we're going to be covering, and it's going to be really fun because I'm going to be up all night sequencing the first dose of this, tonight. So I will try to have the paperwork for you that, gives you something to hang on to so you can take home with you. What I want to do tonight, there's a couple of things that particularly if we're dealing with, people of different levels of observation, where, if you don't know some of this work, there's a lot of things that I've talked about spontaneously that ended up in other workshops that you might not have heard before. So you might have all sorts of questions on things, but actually they were already answered someplace else. And if you ask me where, sometimes I know and sometimes I don't. It's just one of those videos back there in one of the workshops. What I find is interesting is when people have questions, people are interconnected energy fields. And when a person in a group has a question, they're very often speaking for the subconscious imprinting in some of the other people in the group. So if a question comes to your mind, it's very likely that it's a part of a larger question pattern that is affecting other people that it just might not have come to their consciousness yet. Now, one question that came up over break, and it was a very good one, and I've had this question come up before, and I have gone into, I forget how long it was probably like a 45-minute dissertation on it. I won't do that this time. But it was a question that has to do with source and has to do with the very spiritual aspects of how one looks at things when you reach a certain level of consciousness, let's say ascended master consciousness or something like that. I'm going to try, because I believe and I feel that this question is important to acknowledge because it speaks for more than one person, more than the person that asked the question. I'm also aware that it's a perspective that gave birth to the question. There's a perspective of ideas that have to do with about 80% true and about 20% Anunnaki teachings that teach you a certain way of looking at something that uses truth, but to edit a part of it in order to get us into a place where we choose, how would I put it, simply non-action in our quest to be more like Source or to be more of Source. Source, the collective consciousness that people call God, Source is a still point, but Source is also all action and activity in the universe, in all universes. So Source is not simply a stationary thing that's in a state of perfection. It does not move, does not experience itself in different ways. Now, I won't be able to quote the question exactly, but I will try to round the question up in a way that I can get to a point that I'm feeling guided that should be brought out, because there's an issue an issue called balance, that is the answer to the question, that can help us understand a lot of things about how the nature of manifestation works and what really is our role in relation to the process of finding out we're creators. The question had to do with, let's see if I can put this correctly. It had to do with negative and positive. It had to do with acceptance. And it had to do with action versus non-action. The question had to do with, if one goes into the higher states of consciousness and becomes an ascended master, or how I would put it is at the place where we all are ascended masters, isn't it true there that all polarity is dissolved and there is no preference, is what I understood the question to come to, that we simply learn to accept all things. We simply learn to accept and love all things, because as Source, we know that all things are part of us and manifestations of us and take place within us. There is a truth and a fiction to that, all at the same time. As Source, as the one Source, Source is the consciousness that becomes the negative and the positive polarity in electrical charge, that becomes electromagnetism. It is the identity that becomes the force of order and the force of chaos. It is the identity that becomes the force that down here we might judge as good versus evil, or manifestation versus demanifestation. These are the polarities that exist within Source, because it is necessary to have polarity if you desire to experience the hologram of projection. So therefore, Source does allow for and create the negative side of things as well as the positive side of things. When we move into a space of incorporating more of our sourceness, where we get more of that consciousness into our bodies, we do have a different relationship to judgment. The words good and evil don't mean the same things anymore. Evil becomes understood as a state of ignorance and innocence to knowing. But that doesn't mean that all actions are perceived equally and desired equally by Source. Now, if we follow the thought pattern or the idea that Source is a unified field, indeed Source is in its wholeness, Source is a unified field, and therefore is in a state of vibrational harmonization or vibrational co-resonance, which is the feeling we call love, with all things in the universe. And you cannot judge, which is pushing away and separating, and love, which is harmonizing and pulling together, at the same time while you are in polarity. However, Source can do this, because Source is simultaneously in polarity, manifesting as polarity and manifesting as wholeness, coexistent. Polarity exists within the wholeness. If we follow the thought pattern that our job is to transcend polarity consciousness, which is making judgments about things, oh, this is good and that's bad, this is evil and that's holy, this is negative and that is positive, and we assign a value to one of those that's better than the other, it is true that we are missing a point. The point is that they both coexist, and to have one you must have the other. Source creates manifestation because it has a desire. It is an intelligence that has feeling that's a little different than how we experience emotion, but it's direct cognition feeling. It has a desire, and from the desire comes an intention or a cognition, and then an intention, and then a will, and then a thought form, and then a manifestation. The core desire of why creation takes place is because Source desires to know itself continually and perpetually in as many new ways as it can. Of course, it's all simultaneous, or new and old, or kind of like only terms you can experience when you're in the hologram of polarity. In order to create an experience for itself in which Source could study, explore, expand, express itself in all sorts of different forms to know itself fully. The framework for polarity was created. The cosmic matrix, which is called the energy matrix, which is a certain way that Source organized units of its consciousness within itself in order to create polarity of those units to set in motion first vibration, because Source was a still point, all just still and knowing. And inside itself, it decided it wanted to know movement, action, individuation, expression in a different form. So in reality fields that are constructed on dimensionalization, Source created a structure for that dimensionalization to occur. It created the structure by sending into opposite electrical charge and magnetic charge. There's something called base electrical and base magnetic, which is force, or the way consciousness of Source interacts with itself. This began the process of creating, or set a template for creating, a reality field within itself, almost as if you're sitting there closing your mind and you want to think of, okay, I want to experience this type of thing. So you create a thought form. Well, the whole universal cosmic structure is a thought form of Source that takes place within Source, just like you can close your eyes and make an image in your head. This is how reality is perceived from the Source level. Now, the original intention of Source in creating a polarized universe was to be able to fulfill the experience of expressing and knowing itself in individuation, in many forms. Source is dimensional structure. It is the units of consciousness that form dimensional structure. Source consciousness is the consciousness of the planets, of the galaxies, of every energy force that it's known throughout the galaxies, and of every individual. The time matrix, or the cosmic matrix, you have cosmic matrix and then the smaller time matrix within it, are platforms of consciousness within Source that Source can play and experience itself in all sorts of different types of form and interaction of form. Now, in order to have what we call positive experience, or let's say an experience that creates the feeling of joy and expansion and happiness inside of ourselves, that's what those things look like from down here. When you're in a polarized body, you will, until you bring it to the next level up, experience happiness or sadness, where you're experiencing in separate pieces the wholeness or the totality. When we get to the question of, does Source have a preference? Since Source is both, does that mean Source endorses action that could be perceived as so destructive that it could literally destroy the framework itself? This is where the question of, is it our job to just simply become so much of Source that we have no value judgment at all toward either negative or positive? The answer to that part of the question is yes, that's right. The idea is to acknowledge both exist, to realize that to have one you must have the other, therefore both are essential and necessary. So you do not impose one value that's different from the other on the core condition of creation. You know negative and positive must exist. Particle and antiparticle must exist if you're going to have a holographic experience in which to know yourself as Source. However, that framework of reality, that framework, is dependent upon units of consciousness in Source being organized in a specific way. It's a delicate balance of energy particles, of positive energy particles compared to negative energy particles. When I say particles, I'm talking about, we can take it into physics, where we go into the charge, the electrical charge that particles have. Some have a negative electrical charge, some have a positive electrical charge. When we're dealing with Source at that level, up past D15 and past the primal sound fields into expansion, we're dealing with something beyond electromagnetic energy. There it is acknowledged that both polarities are important. Both are equally loved, equally valued, equally intentionally created, with an original intention to be able to experience objectification and externalization. This is where balance becomes the key. Because in the holographic framework, if one or the other side of those things got too far out of balance with the other, you would create a situation within Source where the thought form kind of imploded on itself. In physics terms, that is exactly what particles will do. If the balance of negative and positive forces are not held within that still point at their center, which is the Source intention, the intention itself can become compromised, and Source does not permit that to occur. Source also is aware that when you are in polarization, you as a part of Source, as part of the consciousness that once upon a time you were the one that decided to do this, but once you come in to objectification, your form will determine how much awareness you can take with you in that particular lifetime. While you're in polarization, the realities of polarity will literally be manifest in your consciousness and in your body. You will have experience of joy, this feels good, pain, this feels not good. You can learn to react to pain in a way where you say simply, oh, this is energy too. And you can go to joy and say, and this is energy too, which takes you into a different space of feeling. It raises the emotional body to a higher level, where you can say, I acknowledge both. You can acknowledge both and choose to stand back from it, which in truth is called denial. Or you can acknowledge both and fully allow them to run through you, both polarities. And when they run through you, when you don't assign a value or push either one of them away, they transmute. They come together. The polarities, particle and antiparticle, that compose those thought forms, come together, transmute, turn into antimatter, and go to the next level up. You progressively transmute the polarities so you expand back into Source. There is a distinction between choosing not to value judge, well, I like good better than bad. You know, I like positive better than negative. Some people like it the other way around. If you can realize both are the experience of energy and consciousness in polarity, both are valid, they are fine. But while you're in polarity, one will feel more expansive and one will feel more contracting. Source is aware of itself, being in polarity, simultaneously being in wholeness. It doesn't fear for its ability to expand back into itself, for it knows it can't become lost. It knows it can experience the absolute worst thing that can happen to a being or a universe, which is, in the physics terms, implosion, which is hitting a point of contraction so severe that the template of that form or that planet or that universe literally fragments and goes back to simple units of the consciousness of Source. Now, they still exist within Source. They're not separate from it, but those units of the consciousness of Source hold very, very little recognition of the significance of knowing itself. It's the difference between being unconscious of your relationship to anything else, space dust, or progressively expanding your form to hold the knowledge, the wisdom, the knowing, the vibration of the entire time matrix, and then the energy matrix beyond it, and then Source. We all go back to Source one way or the other. We go back either through fragmentation completely, where we become undifferentiated units of consciousness that do not hold memory of the journey that they were on. They're just as blessed. Or we can go back in the full expansion by which we literally internalize again the entire frequency patterns of a 15-dimensional matrix, the sound matrix beyond it, energy matrix, and then expand back into Source with full knowing. There's a difference between being a conscious co-creator with and as Source, or being the substance of itself that Source will use in its active phase to create with. When we come to the point of recognizing that, first of all, getting caught in polarity consciousness means dividing things up into good versus bad, and I prefer this, so I'm going to push that away from me. As soon as you push it away, you're guaranteeing you're going to lock yourself into a relationship with it. You need, really, Energetically speaking, it's exactly what you do. We need to integrate, but there's a teaching that's put out, and it's inspired by what's called the Ruby Order Matrix, which is a branch of the Anu Elohim. The Anu Elohim were once a part of the family called the Elohai Elohim, which are the founders' races. They became what was called a fallen angelic matrix, a fallen founders' matrix. They attempted to lock the life field in this time matrix by using the divine science mechanics in a certain way that would allow them to not have to go into co-resonance with Source, which means not have to co-create with Source, where they didn't have to listen, in other words. They went into something called code convolution, which is like a little too much inbreeding, where your template gets all messed up and you get some really strange outcomes that weren't intended. The Anu Elohim have been there's a whole history that we have already revealed in the other workshops, and some of it is in this Templar book, that explains what the original fall was, what the original sin was. We don't endorse the concept of sin, but we're showing you where that concept came from. The Anu Elohim created a race called the Anunnaki in reaction to the founders' races, the Christos founders' races, who were at one and co-resonance with Source. The founders' races created humans, or what became the human race line as an angelic race line, as a team that was sent in to bring back into balance certain things that had gone far too out of balance into the chaos principle. Because this time matrix was about ready to explode because its stargates had been compromised to such a degree by the fallen Anu Elohim. The Anu Elohim, fallen angelics, are very beloved. The founders' races acknowledge fully that you're us, but the Anu Elohim do not acknowledge that. They are taking the stance of Source being ignorant to itself, of being innocent to remembering its oneness. The Anu Elohim and the Anunnaki race lines that they created have a very long history of promoting the conflict on this planet and in others in this time matrix. They've created a group in what's called Dimension 11 that attempts to hijack the consciousness in this life field in order to drain it of energy so they can stay self-perpetuating without having to make the higher connections to the higher dimensional fields and to Source to get a perpetual supply of energy. Humans were created as an intrinsic part of that particular drama. Source created them as that. Source created Anunnaki as the other thing, because Source is exploring itself in unknowing in the Anunnaki and Anu Elohim races. It wasn't a part of the original intention of this time matrix. However, because Source is all, even something that is in opposition to the original intention that was set by Source will be embraced, harmonized, brought into the pattern, and stabilized so it can achieve a state of harmonization so it becomes part of the one. In terms of the Anunnaki races, it meant helping them to heal. So they had the potentiality of ascension because their destiny would take them back into space dust. They didn't have the templates that would allow them to get out of a time matrix. The Anunnaki races, and this isn't going to be a discussion on the history of the Anunnaki. I've done a lot of that already in other frameworks, in other workshops. And some of it's in that book, and there's more coming out in a book that we have coming out supposedly in November. It was another quick one that my publisher is going to be publishing. It's called The Forbidden Testaments. Forbidden Testaments of something or other. Anyway, they're forbidden. I can't remember. There's so many titles. Yeah, the Forbidden Testaments of Revelation. That was it. They were the original things that were in the several books of what became Revelations in the Bible that talked about in detail all of these type of things. So I don't have to spend, this workshop isn't about that particular book. This is about information we need first. But I brought up the Anunnaki because right now we're in the middle of a situation since 25,500 BC on this planet where there has been a progressive corruption of the teachings of sacred mechanics here in order to get human consciousness to be in a particular position of non-action, where it is tricked into thinking it is behaving like Source and as Source if it simply chooses to do nothing and let the illusion roll on. That is called a state of detachment. It is the opposite of the state of love, which is vibrational harmonization, which is full engaging. We are being tricked using the concept of understanding Source, where it is neutral as far as value judgment goes. Both are beloved. Both polarities are beloved and part of the self. However, Source is not neutral when it comes to the original intention, to have a time matrix, to have a reality field where both polarities could exist, so that experience could be known. We are being programmed by twisted teachings, 80% good stuff, 20% twist, and if you don't know enough of the mechanics, you can't see the twist. We're being taught to project our thoughts in a way that will render us as undifferentiated units of consciousness, which are what other forces that have their consciousness intact use to create things with. We are being disempowered by a twist on us. Yes?
But wouldn't you consider that Buddhism was a form of detachment, that its teachings were to be detached?
Buddhism was originally part of one of the 12 tribes doctrines that were taken off the Dora-Tura plates. See, there are 12 tribes of angelic humans seated on this planet. Each one of them was given guardianship over one of the 12 CDD plates, placed of Dora-Tura plates. Those plates were created by the founders to hold a certain level of information that had to do with mechanics, with science, with social order, with spiritual development, with relationship to Source, relationship to the other races. Buddhism was originally part of the sacred teachings. So was what we call Christianity. So was what we call the Jewish faiths. Originally, all of the religions on the planet right now represented a portion of one of those 12 plate teachings. When you put them all together, they gave the full externalization, to the degree that this stuff could be put into externalization, of the reality of what it meant to be a part of Source. Now, everyone, and this is what we got into in the Atlantean conspiracy when we talked about that in the England and Ireland workshops, where we began to reveal that information. There has been a progressive infiltration of our race lines here to create DNA mutation. There has been a progressive, there was a great house cleaning in 9558 BC. Literally, ships coming in and getting rid of, using photosonic weaponry, everything they could find that would give evidence that there were ancient human cultures that spanned millions of years. There was a house cleaning done. And then there were some stories taken. Stories from the original plates that have been translated were taken and twisted. Every one of the religions at this point has been contaminated. And you can read them, and it's like, how do you separate the shaft from the grain? You can't tell. The religions have been polarized, where one side is expressing truth, and the other side is expressing its opposite. And you can't tell unless you start to really get into the frequency behind what those words are saying, because words are mathematical programs, sound tones. So you asked about Buddhism. There are certain teachings in there that are true. You can reach a state, there are things that teach about nirvana. That's a certain level of consciousness that corresponds to, I believe, D11. Interestingly, home of the fallen and Elohim, and a lot of other good guys too. But there are teachings from D12 that take you beyond the nirvanic state, which is your beginning of detachment from matter in order to flip through and make the transition into antimatter. Then there's a whole expansion again where you engage again. If you completely go into detachment, saying, well, it's all the same to me, do you really think Source just says it's all the same to me, I'm going to go do something else, and just lets it run? See, this isn't what happens, but this is what the Anunnaki teachings have, or infiltration of good teachings, has tried to do. It's tried to make Source out to be a force that says, oh, well, I created this, and I'm totally neutral, so I don't care if people are suffering and feeling terrible. That's their problem. They're down there now. They'll evolve to become bigger where they don't have to feel that anymore because they can choose not to identify with the pain. If Source were coming from that level of consciousness, personally, I'd want to find another one. If that was what God was like, because it would show me something that's different from me. Well, wait a minute, if we're all manifestations of God, yes, okay, part of Source might look at it that way. But which part? The part that fully knows itself or the part that forgot the rest of itself? The part that's in negative polarity or the part that's in wholeness? I know that beings, even in polarity, if their templates are intact with dimensional structure so they can receive the consciousness coming down from source into their templates, have a huge compassion for everything. They progressively learn to embody the state called unconditional love, which is a state of vibrational harmonization or co-resonance between this and anything else outside of it, so everything becomes a part of you. When you are in a state of love with a thing or a being, you can compare it to your children or to something that really inspires that love feeling. It is the opposite of total detachment. Now, if you go for attachment, you end up strangling the thing you love and it runs away. You push it away. There is a balance between engaging and disengaging. There's a still point in between those two things that allows the state of love to happen. This is the state that Eastern religions were originally trying to help us develop that level of consciousness. But there are teachings out there right now. And, it's really funny. There are two basically infiltration teachings that are happening. You have three representatives on this planet here. You have people who are getting information from what's called the Draconian matrix, which is a D10 fallen angelic, the fallen seraphim matrix. They're the reptilian races, and like the Zetas and those guys are all of the fallen seraphim races. And then you have the D11, which is a little higher in consciousness, fallen Anu Elohim matrix, with their Anunnaki contacts. And boy, have they been busy! They've been teaching us some great stuff. 80% good, 20% twist. And then you have the founders. The angelic humans of this planet are representatives of the founders. And there are some of the Anunnaki and Draconian fallen races who came into human form as part of the Emerald Covenant bioregenesis program so they could get their templates back and evolve to be Christed beings and beyond again. Right now, we're in an amazing period of time because you have all the forces confronting each other. And if you look at it in terms of matter, particles, antiparticles, and antiparticles, the Trinity, the Divine Trinity, it's even represented in the belief systems and in the interstellar contacts that are happening right now, and in relation to the people who are incarnate on the planet right now. There are people that are in human form, that appear to be in human form on the outside, who did not incarnate out of the human matrix at all. Some of them are Anunnaki consciousness that are good guys, that evolved and got their Christos template back, and they're here to help balance and heal the drama. Same thing on the Draconian side. But then there are also races we call the Illuminati races that are representing the fallen angelic creeds. One of the things the fallen angelics do is they teach you detachment. So you kind of walk around and not care much. How they control the people who are in human forms, which means they have the potential to evolve back to being Christed. How they control them is they make sure one level of consciousness can't talk to the next, where the people just see 3D and they don't think anything else exists. So if something comes and whispers, "Hi, I'm from a higher system. I'll give you this sacred knowledge. Follow me. Give me your power, and I will get you, to whatever it is you want," right? This is how people that are called the Illuminati races, the ones that work in certain aspects of world government, certain aspects of world religion, certain aspects of the world management team that we don't know about and we don't hear about on the news, that are controlling and running agendas here that are very, very detrimental to this planet and its people. They are really the greatest victims, but they're the victims of their own consciousness from the higher levels, because it's literally those people who have incarnated out of one of the fallen matrices. Now, they're all in Source. They're all parts of Source. That's why the only appropriate response to them is love. The only way you're going to heal them is to love them. But that doesn't mean just open your heart and turn your mind off so we can suck your energy off your astral body. Because your heart center, your fourth chakra, is your fourth dimensional aspect of your chakra vortice system, energy distribution system. Brings energy in from D4. It's connected to your fourth DNA strand template, and it's connected to the astral level of your biofield. So if something from D4 wants to feed off you, It'll tell you to open your heart and turn off your mind. You don't need to know that. Just let the angel handle it for you. All of this stuff is trickery. The founders will teach you that you have a level of you that is a founder. They will teach you that you don't need to worship a Christ outside of yourself because you have one right inside of yourself. You also have a rishi. Hindu religions talk about the rishis, and they have been twisted to where Hindu people will bow down and grovel and hand their power over to a rishi because the twist has said that I have this and I am a superior being and you're a lowly being and you don't have this, which is an utter lie. Any being down here, it implies the fact that you have the rest. What makes the difference between what level you will express compared to somebody else is how much of your consciousness you can get into your body. It's not that you don't have it already, because you do. We're all ascended masters. Now, we chose as ascended masters to come into a reality system with a specific template that happens to be our body blueprint. We chose why we wanted to come, and we chose our body blueprint in relation to why we wanted to come. If we came for just kind of like a sojourn through the densities, and help out here and there, but we really had a real kind of tough time last time, let's just kind of enjoy it and be, you'll come with a smaller DNA template, because you don't need to anchor so much of your frequency in your consciousness. It's still up there. You'll bring in to manifestation only as much as you need. It's energy economy. Plus, it's kind of like systems are kind of like classrooms that you apply for and see if there's room. If we all decided we were going to come into a system and be fully activated, ascended masters, but it was only a density 1 system in dimensions 1, 2, and 3, ascended master consciousness is up in the primal sound fields, which has 24 times 15 charge, let's put it that way. You try to bring even one full one in, which would come into about 1,728 times 24 individuals, you blow the place up if you brought in too many. So it's kind of like, okay, I'll play Senate Master this time, you'll play, root race person this time. But at a certain level, we know we're all equal. Same with the fallen angelics. They're not bad guys, because at that level, really, good and bad don't apply. God pretending it's awake and God pretending it's asleep is more like it. Because God wants to know itself. And if it's going to know itself awake, well, that implies asleep. What would that be? So there is a level where it is all okay. And there are teams of consciousness that come in, the source manifests itself as, that are the balance keepers. They're the restorers when balance is out. They're called the security team. In this time matrix, it's the Azurite security team, which was the original race that was created to serve that purpose. A race called the Orifim came out of that, which meant sons of light, and not sons, boys, but suns, flaming balls of light. Yeah. Beyond gender, beyond polarization. The Orifim were the seed race, the host race, that another race called the Turanicium, which was a downstep of the Orifim, came into. The Turanicium is the name of the human race. So the fact that we call ourselves the Azurite Temple of the Melchizedek Cloister, Melchizedek is a sound tone frequency that corresponds to the particular family of consciousness of Janus that seeded this time matrix. Melchizedek is a tonal signature of that collective, of Janus, whose consciousness is in here as all of us in this time matrix, including the fallen angelics. That's them too. Azurite refers to the first race of peacekeepers, sort of. But sometimes it's not peacekeepers. Sometimes it's not war starters, but sometimes it's hands-offers, where at times intervention is appropriate, where if you have a force that is created, where Source created a force of beings to come in as an expression of Source to just keep the balances. Sometimes keeping the balances is just standing back and letting the scales do this. It's only when it goes like this and the other scale is like ready to fly off the thing, which would be like explosion of the time matrix. That's when the force that came in to keep the balances will exert action. When things can balance themselves and come to their natural thing, where you have, certain reality systems will have warring and polarity in the lower densities. Non-intervention is usually the stance that will be taken because the beings that are having the problems are trusted. It's known that they have higher levels of consciousness, and they're trusted to eventually get past that rough spot and be able to get their next level of consciousness in. It's only when the beings get so lost in the illusion of the hologram that at times intervention is needed. When non-intervention is chosen, a lot of people say, well, if they care, why don't they do something? You know, it's horrible. Look at all the horrible things that have happened even in human history on this planet. And believe me, these are mild when you start to see what happened in the last 950 billion years since the last life wave came into this time matrix. We have been given the main important parts of the history that have happened since then. And this looks mild. The things that have happened here, which are pretty awful compared to what we're used to thinking. If you're going to make a value judgment, no, I wouldn't want to experience them again. But there is there is a delicate balance for every person, every manifestor. Because remember, you're a part of God that forgot that you were a part of God. You are a manifestor, you are a thought creator. You will create thoughts consciously or unconsciously. If you create them unconsciously, they'll do what they want to, and you usually end up with chaos. If you choose and learn to relearn what you knew up at these higher levels anyway, to create, you can create order and balance. But there is a still point between 2 points of action called vibration and oscillation. Vibration is contraction and energy holding. Our scientists here haven't quite identified this yet, but a few of them have put it out and they're kind of like picked on by the other physicists because, no, it's not our standard theory. No, it isn't. You have vibration here, which is energy holding, which is base magnetic particle template. And over here, you have the opposite of that. You have oscillation. You can look at it as light bulbs. Over here, you have the light bulb off and the energy contracts. It was as if it was hiding inside of the light bulb. And over here, the light turns on and expands. You have contraction and expansion. And when one side contracts, the other expands. As long as that balance is kept, and that balance is kept through the still point in the center. So you have particle, contracting particle, base magnetic. You have antiparticle, base electrical, expanding. And you have the still point within, which is the place where the two of them are held together in their original unified form. That's the point of balance that allows both to exist. This is a pattern that's repeated in everything, from molecular construction to cosmic template construction, to how our hologram is projected outward into what appears to be objectified manifestation. So it's the point of balance that we're looking for when we come into saying, okay, I'm going to remember that I'm a creator, and I'm going to start to try to learn how to remember how to create consciously. You need to learn a balance between when to put energy in, when to take it out, and when to hold it still. When to go into direct engagement, or its opposite, which would be total detachment, or the center point, which is engaged detachment. That's where you put the two together. The greatest reflection of the consciousness of Source, going back to the original question that I brought out here, was the real nature of Source isn't detachment where it doesn't have a preference. It has full allowance and allows all things. But its most full expression is fully engaged detachment, where it is fully detached and fully engaged in the reality field, which means it's feeling, it's experiencing, it's acting, that's being fully engaged. And at the same time, it is still, it is quiet, it is non-intervening, it is not acting. Source stays at a point of creation and manifesting and not creation and not manifesting anything, all at the same time. I wanted to bring out the basic point because there's a lot of this. The person who brought it up, I'm glad. I don't know if it answered all of it completely, but it was enough to bring out a point. I would thank the person who asked the question about it. I would thank the person because I think it's important that we first of all realize that there have been influences here, particularly in the New Age movement, particularly in the last 100 years, where the channeling movement just seemed to happen to pop up. It was planned. Channeling movement was planned since 25,500 BC as the finalization of a series of actions that were taken to take over the halls of Amenti stargates. it's really important that we realize we have within us the still point, which is that full point of connection to Source in its wholeness, that has an understanding that if we learn to open it in ourselves, we can listen to what others have to say, but we'll never, ever again hand our power over to somebody else. When I teach you, I play role of teacher. Actually, we both play role of teacher. We are both teachers and students all at the same time. If a person's trying to take your power, they'll say, I'm a guru, follow me. I'm so much higher than you. And you have no hope of ever being able to handle yourself, so let me do it for you. That is a very classic authority relationship that's used by both Anunnaki and Draconian fallen angelics. Why? Because they want to get into your biofield so they can start controlling your energy systems, because they know you are a piece of Source that has creative potential that you can use. They'd rather use it for their own manifestations. There's a lot that we're going to learn when we move into the information on this sheet. And I know that this is the beginning of this dispensation. This dispensation was due out about 2008. So we're getting the summarized, capsulized version that will get us to the point where we can understand enough to begin using effective action. There's no obligation to be a planetary steward, other than the fact that all humans were originally created and agreed to come into incarnation for that purpose. If you choose to, nobody's going to get mad at you, But we all get to see the outcome of our choices. We get to know ourselves through the effect of the cause that is our consciousness. With the Templar initiatives, the Stewardship Initiative program, we're being prepared to, first of all, get our frequencies high enough, even if we don't want to do anything about dealing with the planet right now. It's too overwhelming, I'm trying to deal with my life, that kind of thing. That's a state of growth that we all hit at some point or another, sometimes frequently. You get to a point and finally, everything is great, and then 2 weeks later it all falls apart again, and you're back to square one at a different level, right? So there's Source, or the guardian races, the founders races. They do not judge people. They know humans as manifestations of themselves that came down into human form in order to serve the role of planetary stewards. But part of that service is serving the self at the same time. It's not saying self is more important than collective, and it's not saying martyring yourself, where collective is more important than Source, because both of those things will keep you in polarity. And the objective of the game is to bring the polarities together, heal them, and raise them to the next level of frequency. That's called ascension. When we get into the issues of mastering manifestation, we're going to deal with the concept of free will choice and natural polarity. We'll deal with polarized thinking versus unity consciousness. Is there a versus, or are really they aspects of the same thing? Creation and the still point. We'll get into subconscious and the rational and the superconscious minds a little bit. The thing that is most important out of the information that they've given, and because of the way the information is being given, where there is still probably another 2 pages of just telling me what I'm supposed to get across to people by the end of Sunday, because technically this was Saturdays, but there's no way the time frame is going to allow all of this to be covered in depth on Saturday. So we'll get as far as we can with this on Saturday. It's going to go into the new stuff. There is still something on security clearance. I can feel it. It's in my field. But I cannot open it until Sunday. It can't be. There's a reason for security clearance. Security clearance means if you have information of, let's say, D13 or 14 or 15, they're considered the Rishik levels of information, where there is a greater understanding of the mechanics of how to access and use power down here. If beings that are following fallen angelic agendas get a hold of those mechanics and use them, it can create damage. Because the fallen angelics at D11 can't access that information because it's from higher than their dimensional field. They can't pull it into their templates. Same thing with the ones at D10. But when you start to give it to somebody down here who has enough coding in their DNA to anchor it and begin its translation, it enters the unified field, which means it starts to dimensionalize, which means the fallen angelics can access parts of it, take it, distort it, and get it out before we do, and start misleading people with it or harming people with it. So the reason why my life is made slightly crazy, where I get sometimes 2 hours before I have to deliver a major presentation, if it's on security clearance, where it would cause more harm to release it early than it would to drive me slightly kooky, trying to get it all down in 2 hours' time. They will keep the security on. There is something that has to do with the bigger part. Now, we're going to talk about tomorrow. We'll start with the personal stuff. We'll start with the manifestation templates and understanding the structure, understanding our thoughts. So we begin to understand the power that we have to work with, and also the identity levels that we have that correspond to those powers. And then we'll learn the technique, where we can start to play with this power, or make it ours, of course, in original intention, or divine right order, as some people call that. Then we're going to go into the planetary stewardship issues. And this is where the security lock is still on. It was only 2 days ago that they let me know that the schedule was pushed up to no later than 2006, but most likely 2003, for the opening of the Halls of Amenti. There were a whole series of agendas that the Draconian fallen angelic races, the Anunnaki fallen angelic races, and the good guy founders races that are trying to support the life field in this time matrix rather than sap its energy. There were a whole bunch of things each group planned to do to fulfill their agenda. These things, I have a feeling, are getting ready to manifest into our 3D reality a little more clearly. There has been, from Dimension 11 in our time matrix on down. Now, each dimension is part of a set of 3 that's called a harmonic universe. Each harmonic universe has many galaxies, many, many galaxies, a whole universe unto itself. From D11 on down, there has been a war going on between the 3 groups. The guardian races don't fight, per se. They simply hold ground and frequency, and they protect the Stargates and others, and they try to assist the ones that are making choices that are going to harm themselves and others. They try to assist them to evolve and to heal and to choose better. Progressively, there's an old saying, as above, so below. Eventually, what's happening up here in frequency works its way down. I'm getting a little bit of kind of tap me on the shoulder and say, you can say this much here. We've been tracking a bit of the agendas on, this is the grand hurrah that everybody's been waiting for, the stellar activation cycle of 2000 to 2017, supposedly. We've been waiting for this since 22,326 BC, when the last one could have occurred, but didn't, because our races were invaded by fallen angelic forces. There were agendas that have progressively moved us forward through time to this point, and many of them have not been pleasant. The fact that we're in this time period now, as a race, not remembering who we are, not knowing how we got into a baby body or where we go when we leave a body, or the fact that we were a race that was created as an immortal race that didn't die, it simply ascended when it wanted to and came back when it wanted to. A race that has become clueless and trapped in 3-dimensional hologram. It was no accident that we were reduced to this condition, let's say. There were both fallen angelic matrices wanted us to be, when this stellar activation occurred, completely incapable of doing the planetary security job of running the Templar, running the Stargates in the Christos template. We were supposed to fix the problem of infiltration here by getting what is called a 12th dimensional security seal, a Maharic seal, put on the planet, through the planet. It's a natural seal that comes up when you activate the planetary grids the right way with the Stargates, and it has to be done in the stellar activation cycle. So everybody has been waiting for the big party time, which is the next stellar activation cycle. It's this time. If things were left, if, let's say, non-intervention was chosen at this point in time, if Source decided, well, we just won't intervene, just let it do what it needs to do. What it would need to do, because of the situations that have been set up, is the fallen angelic would get control here. The Armageddon scenario that was in the Bible was a translation, a twisted one, of some information that was originally in the books that were written by John the Baptist and Joshua Melchizedek that talked about the stellar activation and the particle conversion period coming up, and the fact that there were two Anunnaki factions and one main Draconian faction that planned to duel it out to see who was going to get control of Earth. Both of them would get humans out of the way and neutralize them. Why they want Earth is because Earth has the connection to inner Earth and parallel Earth, like all planets have their connection to the inner systems and to the parallel. But Earth has the halls of Amenti stargates, which hold a technology, a divine technology when it's used properly. It's called the Crystal Pylon Temple Network. Now, this is a manifest technology of massive crystals. I mean, imagine crystal rods, quartz crystal rods, bigger than the size of the Empire State Building, and lots of them. These are the technologies, the natural technologies that are used to operate manually a planet Stargate system. Our Stargate system here was damaged 560 million years ago. That's how Earth ended up in density 2. It had evolved out of density 2, and it fell back. That's the fall, the story of the fall in the Bible. The Bible is coded. It has partial truths and a whole bunch edited. If there was an intervention by the founders at this point, the Armageddon scenario would emerge. The Armageddon story was promoted among what's called the Jehovian Anunnaki, which are the Sirius A bipedal dolphin people. If you see them in their form, they're a density 2 race line. That means they're in semi-etheric matter density. They look like standing upright dolphins. They can breathe air or water. They're a fallen angelic race strain out of the Anu Elohim collective. Well, they fight with another group, the aquatic ape Anunnaki. These are the Palladian Nibiruan Anunnakis. You know, those guys, they're talking to everybody these days. Every channel, little listen. They're walking in all over the place by body snatching. Those two groups were going to duel it out. And they were going to have it's a three-way fight. One with the Draconian matrix, which is called, there are several facets to the Draconian reptilian matrix. One, you have the Omicron matrix, which is the D10 consciousness. The form that they have is etheric matter density, which is density 3, matter density. And they look like dragon moths. They look like big ugly moths that have reptilian type form. That is the Omicron matrix. Now they are a collective of consciousness, just like all of us are up in the higher dimensional fields. But when they get into matter form, coming down in density, etheric, down into semi-etheric, down into physical, that would be the form they would appear as. They're the Draconians. Then you have the reptilians, which are different. They're called the Odedicron, and they're winged reptile avian. It's a kind of bird with leathery wings kind of being, reptile type being. And there's several strains of hybrids, including ones that were part human through raids that were done for our races. So you had this three-way fight just brewing and waiting literally since 22,326 BC to pop up into our hologram. If things were left alone, we would be walking into a nightmare, a thought form field that we would get trapped in. Trapped means the natural templates that connect this planet to its galaxy, to its universe, to its time matrix, to the sound matrix, to source, where something gets shattered in there, and the natural connection can't be made, which means the natural spirals of energy that come down into manifestation, then go back out of manifestation, gets cut off at a certain point. Beings that end up on a planet or a time matrix that get what's called cut off the grids progressively begin. They're literally the templates that they have that they're manifesting on reverse polarity, and they begin a de-evolution cycle where they begin to progressively drop in frequency of consciousness because they can't pull any higher frequency in. A planet that goes into that condition is called a phantom planet, and a time matrix that goes into that condition is a phantom time matrix. There are several within Source phantom time matrices. The timelines, or the time cycles of time matrices, are all interconnected, and they pass through each other every once in a while during stellar activation cycles. When we go through this stellar activation cycle, and in the particle conversion period, the 3-day period, there will be one version of Earth's matter body and the people and things on it that go into that timeline, and they end up in a different time matrix than one of the phantom time matrices. Becomes phantom Earth, which means they lose the templates for the strand 4 and up in the genetic code, which means the three-dimensional consciousness is stuck down here. And it will de-evolve back into lesser and lesser developed human forms, then back into animal forms, back into some types of plant forms, mineral forms, until it's space dust again. It will lose its memory matrix. That's not a good thing compared to the joy that can be known and the ecstatic joy of at one minute with Source when you're conscious of having that. Because intervention has been given, the Armageddon scenario will be seen in the phantom matrix particle base, and it will be seen by the consciousness of the people whose bodies and consciousness have the angular rotation of particle spin characteristic to that particular rotation. People that are somewhere in between, it will depend on how close to which timeline your frequency is, because you'll be pulled by one or the other. It'll either take you up or down. The next stage up is called the bridge zone. The bridge zone is a timeline that a part of Earth's particle base will move into. That it's actually, this is the intervention. It wouldn't normally quite do, like if the physics were just going the regular way, it wouldn't quite do this. But if it wasn't done, the whole planet was going to go into phantom matrix. So basically, there are certain frequency things, implants, put into the planetary grids that would allow certain levels of it to hold more frequency. The crystal pylon temples serve this purpose. They will allow more frequency to hold in Earth's body, because inner Earth is directly connected to Earth. There are locations on Earth called Q zones or Q sites that directly connect to the crystal pylon temples of inner Earth. There is going to be a shift, 45-degree shift in angular rotation of particle spin of a particular level of the planetary matter base and the people who resonate to that level of frequency. That will progressively go into an event horizon or a projected future where they begin to have contact, first telepathic, then eventually it will be taken into, oh my God, they're really physical, yeah, the inner Earth people. And eventually they will realize at the time there are portals that link physical locations that you can literally walk through, shift angular rotation, particle spin, and pop up there. Inner Earth is physically solid, just like it is here. It's beautiful. It doesn't have the level of conflict because it's a system. It's an antagonist. What we're going to do is the material is going to be eventually, at some point in the next couple of weeks, fully given as a supplement to the Templar book, the Templar course book. For the people who didn't buy it, you'll get it, the supplement part of it, as a natural part of the workshop program. So you'll get the chart pack for the program after the program, but you'll have it for reference. So you will have the written material coming. I don't like it when it works this way, because it really plays on my Virgo imprint that likes to have everything done a week before time and have bills paid a month before time and that kind of thing. I'm learning to let go of those attachments and not get upset or stressed out about it. So I hope you can share with that letting go with me. If I've offended anyone by being, as late as I am, I'm almost a half hour late, I do apologize. It has happened before in the New York City workshops every once in a while when I'll be working literally through the night. I do my best to bring you the most accurate information with the clearest detail in the most useful way that I possibly can. And I am human, and there are limitations to what time does here. So I will apologize again for that, and after that we'll just move on to what we're going to do today. Today's going to be a very interesting experience, because in order to bring this material to you in a sequenced form without the standard chart pad that I put together beforehand that sequences the material, I have to work off of several sources for reference, and most of it will come through directly. I will share with you directly. Now, there's going to be a series of graphs used. These graphs are found, some of them are found in the Cathara manual, and some of them are found in the Templar manual. So the people who have either of those manuals, you do already have copies of these graphs. They just have different pages on them than they do right now, and the sequence is different. The graphs help a lot, because I can tell you a story and show you what I mean in visual relationship to the concepts that I'm trying to present. So we'll be working part of the time off the graphs part of the time, I will share with you little bits of some of the pieces of the information that have come through, and then the rest of the time, we're going to go through the itinerary that we got yesterday, and I'm going to talk about the different aspects of manifestation. Then we're going to get into, we'll have a short break between beginning and lunchtime. I usually do you'll have lunch and dinner, and there's a break in between each block. It won't be a long break. It'll only be 10 or 15 minutes, so we can keep rolling. But by later this afternoon, as we move toward the evening, we will be getting into direct technique. That's where I was told that over the lunch break, I'm going to be given the technique of using the master code symbols for embedding. Now, I said, couldn't I at least have that on paper now, like when I got home last night? And they said, no, it will be given over lunch. And I was very fortunate. For my birthday, which was today, Michael bought me a laptop. So I finally have the ability to at least put it on paper. So during lunch, while you guys are having your lunch, I will be getting the technique down that we're going to be using this afternoon. There's going to be more advanced techniques given tomorrow that I'm told I will be given tomorrow. For the guardians to hold the information this tightly means two things to me, just from experience in dealing with them. One, it has potential for probably not for people like us who wouldn't know how to use it wrong because we're just learning how to use it right, but for people who already know mechanics of certain things and we're looking for key elements that they didn't understand in order to misuse them. So it's high-level information that has a lot more potential than will just meet the eye the first time we hear it. And secondly, it means to me that something's up, that they would be taking this tight of a security rein on the data to begin with. I felt that something was up in the planetary biofields for the last several weeks. There's been a really strange tension that I felt in the planetary grids. I wouldn't call it a negative, I would call it a tension feeling. And it had a sound to it, which was a very deep kind of rumble that would happen every once in a while. There's an inner sound, not a sound that you hear with the outside ears. When I get sensations like that from the planetary grids, that's my biofield telling me that the planet's biofield is reacting to something. I do believe that the information that I will be given, probably in increments tomorrow, has to do with some of the things that are occurring to cause this problem. I do have a feeling it has to do with experiments that are being done with sonic waveforms in the Atlantic Ocean. And what this means in relation to work that we have been doing, the Guardian races have been doing over the last year as far as trying to balance the stargates as they open. Today we're going to have kind of a crash course in understanding stargates. As we understand the thought and manifestation, we're also going to get the basic structure of what we're dealing with here in the morning and probably early afternoon session, if I don't get it done by the end of the morning. We will get into a bit about what the stargates are, what is the time matrix, what we're in. Now, some people know this already, and I'm not trying to bore you guys to death who have been, to numerous workshops, but it doesn't hurt to be reminded, and every time something a little different comes out and adds more detail. And for the people who have not had exposure to this information, they might have it in the books, but it helps a lot to have the information to fill it out when somebody talks about it. So we'll go through quickly the basic structure of a manifestation template, where thought and the original thought, source's thought, set the whole thing in motion. And then we'll bring it down into the structure of templates, the substance they're made of, and the structure that that substance takes on its way into what we perceive as the manifest illusion. One of the interesting things that I was given, and at least I got that much on paper, I don't have it reprinted yet, I just got one copy of it, but there was a chart given that explained a missing piece, like the missing link in what we call the transduction sequence, which was the sequence by which thought form goes into primal units of consciousness, goes through several stages that we did have. It goes from what are called Partakai units that I'll talk about, Partakai units to Kelon codes, to scalar waves, to scalar wave grids. And then there was a jump in the data that then it ends up as manifest. And there was not a link. I knew there was something that linked those two things together. The templates that are made of small waveforms that you can't see, that are not manifest in the way we consider manifestation, and the things we call manifest. The information was given on things, what do they call them? Ionic particulates, which are that transition point that happens between a scalar wave template and what are called fire letters that we'll talk about, and the atomic structure. So there were some interesting things. They were listing particles that I've never even heard of because I'm not a physicist. So there's at least a list that shows us, it fills in the blank. So we begin to understand what not only everything is manifested of, what our bodies are manifested of, what the planet is manifested of, what the hologram is manifested of. We begin to understand it's these units that we generate every time we think a thought. When we create, we are literally creating energy forms directly. There is a name to those forms, and we are creating them in specific ways. When they don't work the way we want them to, that means something's wrong with the organic process. So as we begin to understand some of the things about what thoughts are made of, we will begin to be empowered to have more control over what types of thoughts we try to manifest and our success in getting them to be manifest. So we will start with a beginning, I think, on, I want to see if I go that direction or this direction. There's two directions I could go, and I think I will go into structure second. All right, the first thing that I would like to talk about, excuse me, is manifestation templates and template substance. Now, anybody that's taken the Kathara Healing Program or that has read any of the Templar Manual will have already heard the terms Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam. Those are the three primal units of energy that all other energy forces and units are built out of. They are units of consciousness. They come from source consciousness. They are the first manifestations before manifestation as we know it, that source creates within itself to set the template and the platform in which manifestation can take place. Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam are interesting because they're already being theorized by certain kind of, they're considered fringe physicists. They supposedly have discovered the evidence of Partakam units. They were interested in this work when I first started to bring it out, because I'd never heard these words before, except in the ancient days. And all of a sudden, these guys said, "We know Partakam." Wow, we had the same word. Who they've been talking to, you know? But they didn't know the existence of the other two parts, and they all go together. Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam are actually phases of the same unit of consciousness. Partakai, it starts as Partakai, which would represent the whole. That is the template, the core foundation units that form the templates for what's called antimatter, A-N-T-E, matter. That is, when it comes into substance, it's a substance that is composed of both electrical and magnetic charge, or polarity, but they're unified. So it's actually a tri-charge, or a three-charged potentiality. I call it a potentiality because it's not in particle form yet. Now, the units of Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam, the easiest way to understand what they are and where they come from is to understand them as the units of the consciousness of God. It is the closest definition that you can get to understanding where does energy come from in the first place. Our scientists theorize about big bangs and all sorts of interesting theories about how life was created and about how matter might be created. But they have no more proof for their theories than any of the other things. The religions have their versions, the scientists have their versions, and they argue with each other and don't agree with each other. The Partakai, Partakay, and Partakam are the place where spirit and science meet, the place where consciousness, which is spirit, that eternal life force, that intelligent, sentient life force that always has been and always will be, where that meets interaction with itself that utilizes specific mathematical formula, or what would translate into mathematical formula when we're in density, through those mathematical relationships of consciousness to itself. The platform for holographic projection of consciousness is set, and through that, everything that is in what are called the manifest worlds comes perpetually into being. One of the things that's interesting about creation is that creation didn't start once and then was over. It is perpetual and ongoing. There is only one true moment in existence, and that is now. Now we perceive one moment following another. That is an illusion of the hologram that's created by our body templates in their reaction to the unified field of consciousness around them. In the reality of the nature of the game, as I like to call it, it is all happening now Every time vector, every time cycle is a part of the now. Time would therefore be more like space, where you could go from this time and move over to that time. The point of creation and the point of discreation are all the same point. They are all now, and everything in between those 2 points is now. There was not a point where it began and it will stop. It is perpetual. If we can understand that, it helps us to get a broader view of when I talk about the creation point, when I talk about how Source chose to move its consciousness in certain ways in order to form the Partakai units, the first Partakai unit, and from that it formed other things, and from that it formed the holographic template. If you can realize that this isn't a place in the ancient distant past that's so far away that it's not worth remembering, it's something that is alive right now, happening right now, and it's happening every moment within your bodies and within your consciousness, within the planetary body, and within all manifest forms. What is really interesting is when you get to a level of DNA activation while you're still in density, where you can begin to see multi-time vectors. Now, right now, we're in what's called single vector consciousness, which means our DNA is working in a way where we see a single time vector moving forward rather than several. As your DNA activates from 3 strands, which we actually have activated right now, up to 6, you become a multi-vector consciousness. And you can begin to see what's really happening with manifestation down here in density 1. Things flash off and on, literally, so quickly, some parts of them so quickly and some parts of them so slowly that we can't see it with the senses, because the senses that come out of our templates have a certain mathematical calibration that gives them a range of vibration that they can perceive and a large range that's blocked out. That's how the hologram is created. If we had all of our sense receptors turned on, we would not see the hologram. Everything would be direct cognition, known as a part of us within ourselves, as we know ourselves as Source. So the hologram is created by creating negative and positive space. The positive space would represent the object, and the negative space would be the area around it, the space between objects, be it between you and the person next to you, or between this planet and the other planets. Space between objects is a vibrational frequency. It's the vibrational frequencies that our body systems are not geared to perceiving, so they block it out. When we look up at the stars and into outer space, we are actually seeing a massive reality field that's filled with life and consciousness and all sorts of structures and forms and density levels and civilizations. Ours is quite small compared to some of the many that are there. But we look up into space, and our scientists can send instruments made of 3-dimensional matter up into space to explore what's there, and they will see things they call stars, which are balls of flaming gases that have a core. Those balls of flaming gases, first of all, the flaming gases represent D4 and higher frequency. When you get to full 4th strand activation and you can hold that, you would be able to sit on the sun without getting burned. It is a holographic projection, and when we look at deep space, the darkness of deep space, the huge amounts of distances, we are looking at several things. The objects we are seeing, as the stars, are actually part of the past. Even science knows that, with the speeds that light travels. And the darkness we are seeing are the parts of the reality fields that are blocked out because we don't have the same frequency receptors. The receptors are called aparthi in our templates. So we literally don't see them. Because we are the manufacturers of our hologram. The hologram manufactures itself through our DNA templates, through our body templates. If our body templates do not hold a certain frequency, that thing, whatever it is, will not be manifest in our experience, period. There's no way to see something in your experience if you, A, don't have the receivers of that frequency in your template organically, and B, don't have them turned on. If those frequency receivers are not doing their job to receive frequency, the frequency will be blocked out as if it doesn't exist. So you will not see the reality fields that are formed from those types of frequencies. As we move into the time period we're in right now, stellar activation cycle, exciting things happen because in the stellar activation cycle, whether we're ready or not, whether the plants, the animals, the minerals are ready or not, frequency comes into Earth's template. We're all a part of Earth's template because we live on the planet, which means frequency is going to come from the Earth's template into us. It is going to trigger activation of things that have been sleeping and dormant for thousands and thousands of years in the human race. It's going to trigger activation of aparthi, sense receivers that can pick up higher frequency, which means progressively, and it doesn't all happen at once, but progressively, your consciousness brings in more of itself from the higher dimensional fields, which brings with it the hologram of those higher dimensional fields. As you fully anchor, say, your soul matrix, which is the part of your consciousness that's stationed in density 2, dimensions 4, 5, and 6, you will, to get that part of you in your body fully focused here, have to activate strands 4, 5, and 6 in the DNA template, which will create certain changes in the chemical DNA composition that will expand the body and the atomic structure enough so that you can hold those frequencies and that it won't fry you from the inside. Because if you try to put 6-dimensional frequency into a 3-dimensional body, you blow the body up. We're going through a shift in hologram because we're going through a shift in consciousness where we're shifting our lower consciousness from down here into merger with our higher consciousness. And the degree to which we are successful in doing that will be the degree to which our hologram reflects the expansion of seeing and being a part of the higher dimensional fields. Integration of the higher dimensional fields starts subtly, and you're all doing it. Even the people that don't want to hear this stuff are doing it. So it's kind of funny. You know, and God bless the poor people that have been following dogmas that tell them knowing any of this isn't their business and it's evil to know this. They're still doing it anyway. But it's happening to them rather than them working with it to co-create a pleasant experience. We are all beginning, and we have been beginning. Our consciousness right now has changed since what it was like 2,000 years ago. We accrete. This is how we grow through time. Accrete means to bring frequency into ourselves, which activates more of our template, which expands our form and our consciousness. We've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years on this planet. In the early times, when certain things happened to the DNA, the quality we call dreaming now did not happen. Humans at certain points, because they suffered a DNA mutation, did not dream. They were not able to create visualizations where we can close our eyes and imagine something. They were locked in to full 3-dimensional focus. Right now, we don't realize it usually without really thinking about it. But our bodies may be in a 3-dimensional framework, but our minds already are beyond it. We have dreams, every once in a while at least. At least when you were a kid you had them. Everybody dreams at this point. Even science knows that. They can tell when you go into REM with the rapid eye movement that you're in a dream state, where you go into like theta brainwave patterns if you go into deep sleep. Dreaming is the first beginning point of activating strand 4, where you can start to bring in the information that's stored in dimension 4 in the part of your identity that resides in dimension 4. You're linking consciousness with the first part of your soul matrix through dreaming. Now, when you go get a book on dreaming by the experts, I don't know what's wrong with this thing, but it's doing some really strange things. When you get the dream books, you know how the experts like to analyze your dreams? Particularly the ones coming from the psychological perspective. They don't believe in the soul. They're just going to analyze the mind as a chemical reality that happens to produce consciousness. They'll tell you all sorts of things about what your dreams mean. And this symbol means that, and you see this, and it means that to the inner psyche. Or you have a dream about this, and it means you have this hang-up, or that ism, or that problem. I would just, you have those kind of dream books? Pass them on to one of the sleepers that don't want to know about souls. Let them start there. At least they're acknowledging dreams. But those kind of dream interpretation books tell you very, very little. They tell you somebody else's opinion, and they show you their limitations of perception. But they're not going to help you a lot. You have what it takes to begin to understand the language of your dreams. The language of your dreams is the language of your higher self. Your higher self starting with your D4 consciousness, which is your astral level of consciousness. Some people already are getting very good at being able to pull their astral body out of their physical body at will and move it elsewhere in space-time down here. That would be an advancement from dreaming. There's a progression that you will have inside of your consciousness before you get to a point where you're going to be able to physically see a stargate, for instance, and say, I'm going to shift my angular rotational particle spin so I can go through that. There are certain things that are going to happen way before you get that level of mastery of your physical form. The first thing will be dreaming. Now, most people dream, so that's a good thing, because you can look back and say, oh, I'm already part of the way through this process. This is good. I'm not starting at the beginning. I'm already in it. Because you are, if you have any dreams or any recollection of any dreams from even childhood. Dreams have a progression. Dreams are not just, there's certain scientific interpretations that tell us dreams are the brain's way of kicking out certain types of chaotic patterns, your process issues and things, and kind of kicking out the sludge from your daily life and just clearing the consciousness on that level. There is a level of what's called unconscious chaos that has to do with clearing out portions of fragmented thought forms that you're carrying around with you. What science doesn't realize is those portions of chaotic thought forms are not just yours in this body. They're also portions of what's your incarnational imprint. There will be a point in dreaming where you'll become aware of dreaming, and sometimes it'll seem very chaotic, like, what was that? You know, you can dream some of the strangest things, horses standing on top of the Empire State Building, and you know it's important. And you come back and you wake up and you know it was important. You feel it. And in the dream you understood why. But by the time you get back out on this side, you just know it was important, and you have an image of a horse on top of the Empire State Building, and you can't figure out for the life of you what you're trying to tell yourself. You will get these type of dream experiences when your consciousness is learning to raise in frequency enough to disassociate a little bit from the strands 1, 2, and 3 in the DNA template and move itself up into the early strands of the 4th dimensional frequency bands, which is considered the astral plane. After that, there is another level of dreaming where you start to get coherent dreaming, where things start to make more sense, and you get that sense of, aha, I understand this, that still is aha there more in the dream state than when you wake up and try to remember what the aha was. But there's more clarity to the dreams. They might be less often. In the first stage of integrating your higher self, you might get a whole string of chaos dreams, silly dreams, weird, wacky dreams, sometimes scary dreams, nightmare dreams when you're processing fear patterns. They may come in rapid succession, because it's like when you start to move through the chaotic patterns, you tend to move through a bunch of them. Like start here and just clear the whole block of them. So you might go through a cycle of really weird dreamings or nightmares, those kind of things. And then you'll find it stops. And all of a sudden you might think, you don't even dream anymore. What happened to me? Then you'll go into a phase after that of more conscious dreaming, where you start to have dreams and start to remember that you're having dreams when you wake up. And they seem to have more coherence to them. Some of them may seem to be as if you were somebody else, living in another time or place, in another body, having another drama. When you start to move into that next space, you're picking up on information that has to do with your other density 1 incarnations of self that are happening simultaneously here and now. In the dream state, you'll get the beginnings of images, almost like Kodak moments, that are coming through from your other space-time selves. You're learning to open information on the 4th dimensional level that comes into your 4th DNA strand template, makes a link to your 3rd DNA strand template, where your mental body focus is, and you start to be able to remember some of the data. Those are only the beginnings of the process of integrating your higher consciousness. When you get through to the point where you're having sequential dreams, where you actually be able to see a dream from pretty much start to the end, and it seems to have told you a story that makes some sense, and you can remember it when you woke up. That's telling you something. That's telling you you've anchored a whole frequency pattern from D4, which means you've opened the aparthy in your DNA strand templates corresponding to those frequencies in D4 and linked them to the aparthy in your strand 3 template. So you've made a conduit, a live conduit of consciousness. That's how you remember dreams. If you don't remember dreams yet, it simply means you haven't opened any of the 4th strand aparthy. And it will come because the frequencies on the planet right now will demand it. They are going to trigger fourth strand activation in people, whether or not they're ready to do it. So people will start dreaming. And they'll start doing a lot more than that, too. When you get to a certain level of dreaming, where you're synthesizing frequency and being able to download it down into your consciousness here, you'll go from sequential dreaming to simultaneous dreaming, where you will not only be aware of yourself in a dream, it will become a lucid dream, where it's like hyper-awareness. It feels more real than it does here, because it's more intense. The higher you go up in frequency, the more intense and immediate the experience feels. You'll have lucid dreaming that goes into simultaneous lucid dreaming, where you will find yourself in several dramas, knowing you're there all at the same time, as if you're watching 4 movies at once. It'll start with maybe 2, and then it will expand. Then you start to learn you can move your consciousness from one to the other by expanding and contracting your consciousness. Expanding and contracting your consciousness